what?
I said Malcolm alleged that some of Elijah's women were underage secretaries, and can you expound on that?
Yeah, well, I guess they were because they were there. I seen them. I seen them myself. It's all true. It's all true.
Good evening, messenger. You convinced us that you were the last messenger. How many other bastard children do you have?
Barbershop conversations, man, and pleasant surprise, man, reached out to me, man, and first I want to say thank you for trusting me with your story, Chris Ali, and I look forward to telling your history and telling your truth as it pertains to your history in the Nation of Islam and so on and so forth. And as you know, I'm just a connoisseur of this information because of my admiration for Malcolm X, and I was also born in Harlem, actually born in Presbyterian Hospital, actually where Malcolm X was pronounced dead. And so I just want to say thank you for reaching out, and I look forward to hearing your story, man.
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it, man. So people are gonna be like, who is this guy? Who is Christopher Ali, also known as Abdul Rahman Ali now?
Yeah, newly adopted Abdul Rahman Ali. Right. That was my father. So just go ahead and put it out there. First off, let me just say, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. My name is Chris Ali, born Christopher Ali, to Minister Abdul Rahman, also known as Minister Abdul Rahman Muhammad, also known as Minister Abdul Rahman Akil. I am one of his sons from another relationship. Let's just say it like that, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But the world will consider me one of his bastard sons, and I sit here today as newly revised Muslim and just a proud son of my father. But I believe I haven't really counted in a while, but I believe I am his ninth child overall. But again, I'm from another relationship from Minister Rahman.
Yeah, and for those of people who don't know who Minister Rahman is, who is Minister Rahman?
Minister Rahman was and still is the greatest, most accomplished Southern Regional Representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that ever lived. He came in the Nation of Islam in 1956. Was known as Captain Sam. A lot of believers know him. A lot of people know him as Captain Sam in Miami. Personally responsible for the very early development of a young Cassius Clay, who later became Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, before we jump in him, you said that you were from another relationship. Can you speak on that relationship and your childhood as it pertains to Captain Sam and the Nation of Islam?
Well, the Nation of Islam fell, as a lot of people know. The Nation of Islam, well, some would say it was a fall. Others would say it was a transformation or a resurrection. But the Nation of Islam went through a severe change in 1975. My father at the time was the Southern Regional Representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad here in Atlanta, Georgia. In 75, going into 76, my father being unable to really adapt to the changes that Imam Waratadeen was establishing in the Nation of Islam, essentially broke from the Nation of Islam, or at that time was the World Community of Al-Islam. He couldn't get with that. He couldn't rock with the changes that Imam Waratadeen was putting in place. So around 76, maybe early 77, he went to Muhammad Ali and said, "Hey man, let me go ahead and work with you full time." So during that period of time of him working with Muhammad Ali in 70, 76, 77, he met my mother, Marilyn Carr was her name. My mom had, it was from Las Vegas. She had strong family ties. My mom's family had strong family ties into the Las Vegas gambling scene. Some would consider it the underworld. My great grandfather worked very close to Bugsy Siegel during the time when Vegas was in its early years. So that's my mother's family. He met my mom basically in Ali's camp, you know, and to just go ahead and just put it on out there. Yes, initially, my mother was an interest of Muhammad Ali, but eventually, you know, my dad moved in, and now I'm here.
Right. Was there friction
With who exactly?
between Captain Sam and Muhammad Ali as it pertains to your mother?
Yeah, it caused a problem in the camp. Yeah, it did. That's ultimately what led to my pop leaving the Ali camp at that time.
And what year is this? 77?
He met her in 70. No, I was born in 81.
Right.
So he met my mom roughly 70, 79, 80, somewhere in there. So and my father officially left the camp in 81, not long after I was born.
So 81 is roundabout Trevor Burbick.
Yeah, Ali's
So
last.
that was it ended up being Ali's last fight. So your dad, because of what you said, he survived his
Yeah,
basically his whole boxing career.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
There was a period of time Pop had fell off. I want to say during the George Foreman fight,
Hmm.
because Ali wasn't in good standing with the Nation of Islam during those years. A lot of people don't know that, but
Right.
Ali wasn't in the best standing with the nation and Elijah Muhammad during those years. So my father really wasn't around during that time. But after Ali smoothed that out with Elijah Muhammad and the nation, after that George Foreman fight, he was back in the loop with him. But like I said, I was at that fight as a baby. My mom and my father took me to that fight actually.
To what fight?
The Trevor Burbick fight.
Okay, so Trevor
Yeah.
Burbick was so you
Yes,
had to been
Ali, 1981 was the last fight that Ali fought in the Bahamas, and
in the
I was
Bahamas.
down there for that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the time where they came in. If it was it the Nation of Islam that came in and beat up Don King, legend has it.
legend. I don't think it's a Nation of Islam. You know, I can't confirm or deny that, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, Pop, and my mom was down there during that time.
So you had to be months old.
Yeah, that was December of '81. I was born in July of '81.
Okay, yeah. So yeah. So was Captain Sam married to another woman
Yes,
while dating your mother?
yes.
So were you raised in Miami or were you raised in Las Vegas?
I was raised actually in Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, like I said, my father was married to his first wife, Mildred Simon
Hmm.
was her slave name. She later on became Zarifa Rahman, and they were together. They had their children. I forget the number off the top of my head, but they had their children, and that marriage, I want to say, probably officially ended really in the '80s, in the mid '80s. But he met my mom, and that was during the time when everybody in Ali's camp was doing their thing. You know, it wasn't just my father. Ali had went through his transition with Belinda, with Portia, and my father met my mom during the same time. So that caused friction. You know, it caused a lot of friction that really exists to this day.
Right.
But
Right.
the reality is, the history that the Nation of Islam, I'll say, will propagate now is that he just met my mom, knocked her off, and then had a baby, which is not true at all. He actually wanted to be with my mother. You know, he actually fell in love with my mother and wanted to be with her. And that could be attested over to the fact that I have a brother who's 5 years younger than me. So there was a relationship there, but and we can get into that later. But it wasn't allowed to. It wasn't allowed to. He wasn't allowed to establish that due to his relationship with the Nation of Islam.
So what was your childhood like? How often did you see your father, and what was the relationship like with Captain Sam and your mother? And currently, is your mother still alive?
Yes, she is.
How old is mom?
I think mom is about 67 now.
67. So
Yeah.
she was 20 years younger than Captain Sam, 30 years younger?
Quite younger, yeah.
Okay.
He
Okay.
was in his 50s. My mom was, I want to say, 25, I believe.
When they met.
When they met, yeah.
Okay.
He was never Captain Sam when in my lifetime or her
Gotcha.
lifetime. Yeah, he became
Gotcha.
Abdul Rahman in the 70s.
Okay.
So yeah, so but he met my mother when the Nation of Islam had already
Yeah.
taken his fall. You know, he wasn't an active Muslim at the time he met my mom.
Yeah. My apologies
He
because
wasn't active in the nation. He was a Muslim, but he wasn't active in the
right,
nation.
right. And the reason why I referred to him as Captain Sam is because much of my research is in the 60s and in the 60s as it pertains circling around Ali and Malcolm X relationship. So I apologize.
Oh no, it's no
If
problem.
I call him Captain Sam while doing this interview. I do want to be respectful.
Oh no, understood.
Yeah. Thank you. So explain your childhood.
Well, basically, my father was in my life. My father never wanted to distance himself from my life, though those around him encouraged that. You know, naturally, his first wife was not open and was not at all receptive to what happened. But like I said, consider the time and consider the circumstance. Some will say he had a broken heart, so he did what he did have a broken heart. I mean, you can consider that, but he was around. He was a Muslim. He was a Muslim, and in Islam, you can have more than one wife. That's what led to the conflict in Muhammad Ali's life, of course, but that was the premise he was operating on.
Right.
My father was no different. He met my mother, fell in love with her, and I was a result of that. Though, like I said, though there were forces in his ear close to him, in his family, and in the Nation of Islam, encouraging him to distance himself from that relationship, he never did it. Therefore, I was raised in the Nation of Islam. My father, like I said, I was born here in Atlanta. My father pretty much moved my mother to Atlanta. I was born right here in Atlanta, Georgia, Gray Memorial Hospital, and my father was in my life as long as I can remember.
So how was the time split? Because obviously he was still married. You said he didn't leave that marriage until the late 80s. So
Well, he there was a period of time, and this is what he told me. Of course, I don't have a coherent memory of this, but there was a period of time that he attempted to fix the marriage, but ultimately he didn't want the marriage. He wanted to pursue some with my mother, but my mother didn't want to be in the nation. My mother didn't want to convert to Islam. So that was one factor. Another factor is in the 80s, early 80s, Mr. Farrakhan pursued a lot of the old members of the Nation of Islam, and my father was one of them. But my father initially didn't want to go. My father initially didn't want to help Mr. Farrakhan, not because of any issues with him. He actually loved Mr. Farrakhan, but my mother was in play, and even though he tried to help Mr. Farrakhan early on in the 80s, it didn't really materialize because his first wife made sure she expressed to Mr. Farrakhan that she didn't feel comfortable with him working with him while my mother and myself was in the picture. So he tried, he tried to distance himself. There was a really good brother who I want to give a major shout out to and much love to, Brother Robert. At that time, I think it was Brother Kareem, who I stayed with and who I lived with during that period of time. While he was trying to figure it out, man. I mean, you got to consider the fact this man lost everything he knew as a nation, as a leader in Elijah Muhammad in 1975, went and helped Ali. Ali's career burnt out. Now you're talking about the late 70s, early 80s, dealing with a man that's trying to find himself, and trying to figure himself out. So he made an attempt to maintain his first family, but that's not where he wanted to be. And ultimately they couldn't come to any common ground on that. So my father attempted to carry on with my mother and to establish something with my mother. But like I said, she didn't want to be in the Nation of Islam. So and the Nation of Islam really wasn't trying to accept me and my mother at that time, early on. So ultimately, man, my father said, you know, he wasn't going to give us up because there were forces in his family, some of his children, his sisters. Um, of course, his first wife was encouraging him to give me up to the state. You know, Pop wasn't having that. You know, Pop said, I'm not giving up my children. Because I have a little brother as well, who's 5 years younger than me, which goes to attest that there was a relationship there with him and my mother. But essentially, I was the initial shakeup in that situation, and he
Right.
wasn't having that. You know what I mean? And but eventually, you know, the minister, you know, allowed him to serve and function. So he ended up actually serving Mr. Farrakhan as one of his minister emeritus up until the time he departed.
What?
Right. I said Malcolm alleged that some of Elijah's women were underage secretaries, and can you expound on that?
Yeah, well, I guess they were because they were there. I seen them. I seen them myself. It's all true. It's all true.
Good evening, messenger. You convinced us that you were the last messenger. How many other bastard children do you have?
What how many kids did your father have with your mother?
It's just myself and my younger brother.
Okay. Okay. And so he was born 1976.
My younger brother, no, he was born in 85, I want to say. He's 5
Oh,
years
younger brother. I'm sorry. I'm thinking.
younger
So
brother.
you're the oldest. Yeah, 85. Okay, 1985. Okay.
Yeah, September, I say, of 85.
What year was your mother born?
She was born the year my father joined the Nation of Islam, actually, 1956.
1956.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the Nation of Islam was a sex cult?
A sex cult? No.
No.
No, I don't think it's a sex cult.
How would you capsulate the Nation of Islam now as an adult?
Right now?
Yes.
The current Nation of Islam or just historically?
Let's try both. Let's go now and then digress back into historically.
Right now, the Nation of Islam currently it exists. I think it's fractured. I think it's fractured from the original Nation of Islam.
Right.
Mr. Farrakhan made a great attempt, I believe, to reestablish his father's work, but it's nothing close to it. You know, it's nothing close to it. Part of that, I believe, is because it really is no respect for the established founding fathers of the Nation of Islam, including my father. Actually, I don't think my father got half the respect he deserved under the current state of the Nation of Islam.
Right. Right.
In my judgment.
Right. Now, when you look at the fundamental teachings of the Nation of Islam, and you see your father had you out of wedlock, we opened the interview and you said bastard, and you know that your father is married to another woman. Do you think that it's it's like a silent acceptance to have relationships outside of your quote unquote marriage, and it be deemed acceptable?
Well, I would say so.
Mhm.
I would say so. I wouldn't look at it as totally nefarious.
Mhm.
I mean, they're Muslims. I mean, as Muslims, you know, you have that right and that option. Is
Right.
it properly practiced here? No, it's not. Do they properly uh, deal and engage with women? No, a lot of them don't. I would
Right.
say.
Right. Right.
But particularly my father, I would say that the intention was not to be devious or lustful. You know, he just fell in love. It happens.
Mm.
It's a human factor that he went under, and I'm glad he did, or else I wouldn't be here.
Right. Now, people are going to say you were born 1981. How do you know all this information? And you say what?
My father, like I said, my father raised me.
Mm.
I actually served in the Nation of Islam, man. Like I said, my father raised me to be Muslim.
Mm.
During the time my father tried to be with my mother, they had little residence and apartments here in the Atlanta area. They tried to establish a relationship, but one thing that I recall is that Mr. Farrakhan's picture was always on the wall.
Mm.
So my father had a love for the nation and Mr. Farrakhan. He wasn't always able to express it because, and initially I should say, because he had my mother, and that created a conflict. But I asked my father. I sat at my father's feet all my life. Um, in January of '94, I made my own acceptance to Islam under Dr. Khalid Muhammad. It was really him, hearing him, not knowing that at that time he was on his way out of the nation. But as far as me, when I heard him, I was fully energized, and actually, and my father as well. I want to make my father proud. I'm gonna be honest with you about that. I never had a full-fledged, full-blown um, conversion experience on my own. A lot of it was due to me wanting to make my father and please my father, and that's what he wanted for me. But to answer your question, he told me a lot of the history personally.
Mm.
Just about everything I'm telling you came right out of his mouth.
Right. Now, you said you were raised by your father. So if there's 365 days in a year, how many days would you say that you and your father spent together?
Yeah, I mean every day. In like I said, the early '80s, he made an attempt to be with his first wife and
Mm-hmm.
save his family. That didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, my mother she had her own issues, and that's another conversation. But she had her own issues, and she was not at that state desirous to be a full time mother. So if anything, she's the one that kind of left. But my father raised myself and my little brother by himself as a senior citizen with little to no help from the Nation of Islam. Um, that's just a fact
Mm-hmm.
because they deemed him as being a burden a lot of times. So my father was a hustler up almost to the day he checked out.
Mm.
Working, not in a negative sense, but working and doing it on his own. So I would say from '88 to the day, to the day he passed, I was fully in my father's life.
Right. And he just recently passed in what, 2021? 2020?
20, I want to say 20, and it was 3 years. It'd be 3 years of the 22nd of April.
Okay. 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 Now you mentioned that he got no support from the Nation of Islam, which is Louis Farrakhan, correct?
Yes, very little support. Yes.
And my question is why?
Um, the current state in the Nation of Islam is I would say the money changers. I call them money changers. Um, Money has been those who control the resources of the Nation of Islam are at the top, obviously, and Minister Rahman was not included in that. Being the fact, even though the fact he built the southern region for the Nation of Islam, there would be no Black Atlanta as far as the Nation of Islam if it wasn't for my father. And there is and was a lot of jealousy and envy when it came to him due to his relationship with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, due to the fact that the role he played in the Nation of Islam under the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, a lot of jealousy and envy existed around him. There was a lot of fake love too, but he was shut up. He was hamstrung,
Mm.
even down to the relationship with my mother, because in the reality, considering how a lot of ministers are getting down in the Nation of Islam now, even with my mother, he should have been left alone, but he wasn't.
Mm. Right. Uh, I want to ask a follow-up question uh, with Khalid Muhammad. Why
Mhm.
were you so attracted to Khalid Muhammad
Oh man,
in
Khalid
terms
was
of his teachings?
Khalid was unique. That's the one thing. Khalid was unlike any other minister in the Nation of Islam.
Mm.
Khalid was one who, of course, he taught Islam. He taught the fundamentals of the religion, but he had no problem venturing out into Afrocentric type of ideas. Very broad thinker, very strong thinker, um, consistent. You know what I mean? Consistent, particularly when it came to the white man.
Right.
He just was a fascinating, captivating individual. I mean, I've actually met him on a few occasions and talked to him on a few occasions. And he
And
was
what
my inspiration for wanting to be in the ministry, actually.
and what are
Khalid
you
Muhammad and my father, actually.
and what are can you elaborate on those engagements?
Um, they were random. You know, I saw him in a mall. He hung out in Atlanta a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he hung out in Atlanta a lot. Matter of fact, the longest I talked to him was at I think it was Perimeter Mall. He was out of the Nation of Islam at this time. He had just recently got out of the Nation of Islam, and he actually told me to stay strong. You know, stay strong because I was in the ministry at that time. And just to put a little background on my credibility, I was Minister Farrakhan in the Nation of Islam's second youth representative. The first one was a guy named Prince Hakeem, but my official title was Junior FOI Minister. And that was my function at the time I met him.
Right. Right. And what do you believe happened to uh Khalid Muhammad?
As far as his death,
Yes, as far as his death. But before we get to the death, what do you think? Do you think the Nation of Islam wanted Khalid Muhammad dead? And do you think that they were the ones?
I think factors and individuals
Right.
in the
You said
Nation of Islam.
fractions?
Yeah,
Okay.
factors.
Yeah, I get you. I get
Yeah,
you.
factions. Yeah, excuse me, factions in the Nation of Islam.
Right.
Certain individuals, I'll put it like that, definitely wanted him off the scene. But what happened to him? He wasn't to go along, get along. You know what I mean? The establishment, the leadership establishment in the Nation of Islam was totally against him, and that's ultimately what led to him. Very similar to kind of what happened with Malcolm.
Right.
A lot of similarities in there.
Right. It is a lot of similarities. They even buried in the same cemetery. How
Yeah, I
ironic
didn't
is
know
that? Yeah, at Ferncliff. I actually visit both of them when I go visit Malcolm. I haven't been this summer. It'll be 2 years since I've gone, but I typically go once a year. But COVID got the best of that. Let's go all the way back to you say 1956. I said Malcolm alleged that some of Elijah's women were underage secretaries, and can you expound on that?
Yeah, well, I guess they were because they were there. I seen them. I seen them myself. It's all true. It's all true.
Good evening, messenger. You convinced us that you were the last messenger. How many other bastard children do you have?